and Furious and that which happened while I was Attorney General, I'm just not as familiar with the Hernandez case. I'm just not as familiar.
Okay. Thank you very much for your testimony. Senator Cornyn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Holder, let me just try to tie up some loose ends. You agree that on February the 4th, the letter that was written to Senator Grassley that with the allegation that ATF sanctioned or otherwise knowingly allowed the sale of assault weapons to a straw purchaser who then transported them into Mexico is false. That letter, dated February the 4th, 2011, is itself false. We now know.
I'd say what I said is it contains inaccurate information.
Well, isn't that false?
Well, false, I don't want to quibble with you, but false, I think, implies people making a decision to deceive, and that was not what was going on there. People were in good faith giving what they thought was correct information to Senator Grassley. We now know that that information was not correct.
Okay, if you won't agree with me, it was false, it's not true. You agree with that, right?
I'd say it's not accurate.
It's not accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Did the person who wrote this letter on February the 4th, 2011, have they ever been disciplined or otherwise been held accountable for providing false information to a United States senator?
Well, as I indicated, the people who wrote the letter acted in good faith, thought that what they were sending was, in fact, accurate information. The people who were supplying the information thought that it was accurate. At some point, somebody in that chain did not give good information, and that's one of the things that the Inspector General, I hope, will be able to determine.
Did Lanny Brewer know better than what was represented in the February the 4th letter? Was he privy to either of these two memos, the July 5th, 2010? He said he was briefed April 2010. And by the way, what office does Lanny Brewer hold in the Department of Justice?
He's the Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division.
And why would Lanny Brewer, knowing as he did back in April 2010 about Operation Fast and Furious, allow a letter that went out on the department stationery February the 4th, 2011, why would he let a letter that was false represent the position of the Department of Justice?
Well, first off, the briefing, the blue one, AAG Brewer brief, that was about wide receiver. That wasn't about Fast and Furious.
By the way, do you know the differences between wide receiver and Fast and Furious?
I mean, do I know that they're different operations?
Right. And so do you know the differences, the factual differences between wide receiver and Fast and Furious?
I know that, well, I mean, there are a number of differences, both, I think, in scope, both in terms of time. The Bush administration was the one that started wide receiver. The Obama administration is where Fast and Furious began.
Are you winging this, or do you actually know?
I know this.
You know this? Do you know that wide receiver was done in conjunction with the government of Mexico, and the intention of the plan was to follow the weapons, and neither was there the intention to follow the weapons on Fast and Furious, nor did Mexico know that the United States government was allowing guns to walk into the hands of the cartels. Did you know that?
Senator, I have not tried to equate the two. I've not tried to equate wide receiver with Fast and Furious.
I'm just asking you if you know the differences between the two.
Sure, and as what I know about wide receiver, what you have said is in fact correct. There are memos that talk about gun walking that are related to wide receiver, but again, I'm not trying to equate the two.
When you got Senator Grassley's letter on January the 30th, 2011, why didn't you investigate?
I did. I asked people on my staff to look into the materials or the concerns that were raised in the letters. It was a January 27th letter, I believe, and a January 30th letter. I think there were two letters that he gave me on, I think maybe the 30th or 31st, something like that. And I asked people on my staff to look into that, and they did. And they started asking questions within the department about the material that was contained in the Senator Grassley letter.
And of course, that was just shortly after the letter that Senator Grassley gave you was shortly after the well-publicized murder of Brian Terry, the United States law enforcement agent.
Right. And to be clear, the letters were addressed to the acting head of ATF, Ken Melson, but he gave them to me.
Who works for you.
He gave them to me on January 31st.
Right. And so does, I believe that you told Senator Whitehouse that you thought your staff made the right decision in not bringing Fast and Furious tactics to your attention. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct.
Okay.
What I said was that there was no indication in the materials that they reviewed that contained anything about the tactics that were used in Fast and Furious, and as a result, there was no need for them to bring to my attention the reports. If, in fact, there was in those reports indications of gun walking or something like that, I think they should have brought that to my attention, but that was not contained in the reports. And that is what Assistant Attorney General Brewer said was the mistake that he made. When he heard about gun walking, he should have brought that to my attention or to the attention of the Deputy Attorney General.
Can you name me one person who's been held accountable for this Fast and Furious operation? Just one in the Department of Justice.
Well, we have made a number of changes with regard to personnel, both in the Phoenix U.S. Attorney's Office, also at the ATF headquarters here, and I will certainly await the report that comes out of the Inspector General, and I will assure you and the American people that people will be held accountable for any mistakes that were made in connection with Fast and Furious.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Cornyn. Thank you for coming back. And Senator Franken, did you have any questions?
Yes, I do. I'm sorry I haven't been here. We had a help committee meeting, so I've missed the last 2.5 hours. I trust it's been going well. Before I begin, I just want to take a moment to align myself with what I heard Senator Cole's comments were on the AT&T and T-Mobile merger. The antitrust division sat largely dormant under the previous administration, and I'm very pleased that under your leadership, the department was willing to send a message that antitrust law is still relevant and should be applied to block large anti-competitive mergers. So thank you. I know you've had a long day, so I'll just have one question. As you know, there is an epidemic of bullying against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender students in our nation's schools. 9 out of 10 LGBT kids are bullied in school. A third skipped school in the last month because they felt unsafe. These kids are missing school. They're going as far as committing suicide because of this, and they're literally being bullied to death. Yet our nation does not have a law that explicitly prohibits discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity in our public schools. General Holder, I have a bill, the Student Non-Discrimination Act, that would fix this. It's been co-sponsored by 34 senators, including the chairman and almost all of the Democratic members of this committee and the Help Committee. In its past appearances before this committee, the Department of Justice has lauded the goals of this act, the Student Non-Discrimination Act. In fact, it even acknowledged that LGBT bullying was the greatest growth area in the civil rights docket. But even though this administration has publicly and formally supported other LGBT rights bills like the Employment Non-Discrimination Act and the Respect for Marriage Act, it has not yet publicly supported the Student Non-Discrimination Act. General Holder, does this administration support this bill or does it not? Well,
I think the operative word that you used is yet. I will go back and try to see where we stand and why we are not in a place where I think we ought to be formally. Because I think you're right, as you look at the steps that this administration has taken with regard to similar issues, we have been, I think, in an appropriate place, in the right place. And with regard to the bill that you are talking about, I hope that we can get to that appropriate place relatively soon.
Well, thank you very much, and I hope that's before we get to the floor with it on the ESCA bill. Thank you very much, General Holder.